Hey, everybody, welcome back to our high level masterclass series where we invite high level users who are subject matter experts in their day to day business using features, functions within high level or apps within the marketplace to grow their business. I want to invite you to join myself and our special guest today, Frank Sondors, the co founder and CEO of SalesForge. As a high level user, he comes to our ecosystem with over 10 years of experience selling software to businesses of all different sizes. He started his business in the last 2 years as a co founder and the CEO with over 10,000 customers using his service. And what he's going to be teaching us today has everything to do with mastering email deliverability within high level, as well as using strategies and tools to do so within the high level platform. Frank, it's a pleasure to have you on. I know we've been back and forth. You're in the other side of the world, and it's finally great to connect and have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, JB. So that was a great intro. I couldn't have done it any better. Yeah, like you mentioned, I've been in sales for well over a decade. In my last gig, I had a sales team of 50. I've been sending a gazillion of emails, literally a gazillion of emails across 50 sales reps. So, and then the things have massively changed in the world of email deliverability. It doesn't matter whether you're an agency or software vendor. I used to sell a lot of software, but at the end of the day, when it comes to email, you have the lowest CAC with email, so meaning lowest cost of customer acquisition. We need to make sure email keeps on working for all of us out there, especially in the agency space, right? And you have end customers, right, that expect that emails get delivered. Doesn't matter whether you're using HighLevel, right, or anything else. We need to make sure that they land in the primary, and it's super, super difficult these days to do that. It's as difficult essentially as running Google Ads campaigns these days. So you need to know many things. There's over 100 variables that you could literally optimize, but we're going to look at some of them, the most important ones today. So whoever's listening right now, I would really love to see where you're from, guys, where you're from in the world. So I'm across the pond. I'm in Europe, right? JB is in the US. And there's a bunch of other people probably tuning in, all parts of the world. So really, really would love to see, where you're tuning in from. So yeah. So as I said, we're gonna go through some main pillars essentially of deliverability. I'm gonna walk you through. And hopefully by the end of this session, we're going to have a better grasp on deliverability, specifically cold email deliverability, specifically B2B, right? So B2B cold emails, we need to get them delivered, and then we need to then push them through a nurture, within high level and things like that. So yeah, so let's go. So should I share my screen, JB?
Absolutely. Frank, in a quick second, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
could you sum this up in 3 pillars for us of what you've put together in the presentation? I know that you may go through in-app. It would be
Yeah.
really helpful.
Yeah, so the main focus of cold email deliverability, there's 4 of them altogether. We're going to cover the 3 out of 4. The 4th one doesn't make sense really to cover in this session, but the first one is really making sure that you're using the right software to send the emails out, to cold emails. You need to use a particular software. Number 2 is like the email infrastructure, making sure that you have the right infrastructure in place that you use to send those cold emails out, because you shouldn't be sending cold emails from your primary business domain. 3 is the copy. We're going to focus on the copy heavily. And the 4th is, which we're not going to cover, is the data. So it's kind of reaching out to the right leads. You can literally run a whole masterclass just, finding the right leads. We're not going to touch the 4th pillar. We're going to really try and deep dive into the 3 pillars. And then we're going to have what they call golden nuggets. Some of the things that you can think about, how can you improve essentially deliverability, but also reply rates from your prospects. That's super important, because having essentially responses, the engagement from the prospect actually improves your deliverability. So figuring out, kind of different ways of what you could do to make your prospect respond. And yeah, you can, and that's something that's actually what we're gonna look at. So let me share my screen.
Yep. And while you're doing that, Frank, I'm going to just ask everybody, if you haven't had a chance, if you're just tuning in right now, let's make this as engaging as possible. Definitely comment below whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube. Please share your questions. If you could jot them down with Q and then your question, we'll do our very best to get those questions answered. At the moment, I won't be able to answer for Frank because he is our subject matter expert and he will be obviously teaching this, but we promise you that we'll make our way back to get you those answers. And then most importantly, just what Frank's about to show you, it's important to note that results will vary. The use of high level has everything to do with how you use it, and this training is just designed to give you an overview and a visibility of what's available. So, past performance is not a guarantee of future performance. HighLevel does not guarantee that you'll experience financial gain or generate revenue, as results will vary. So we got all the important stuff out there, Frank. We got our agenda covered. We have our disclaimer covered. Now it's to get to what our agency owners want to know in order to acquire, serve, and build relationships using HighLevel. I'm going to throw it over to you. I'll keep an eye on the comments, and I may interrupt you from time to time with any questions. Let's rock and roll.
Let's do this. So let's look at a bit of the agenda, right? So we're gonna talk about the scaling bit. So the infrastructure. So I mentioned the infrastructure pillar. I mentioned the copy pillar, and then we're gonna go into what we call the golden nuggets, right? So with the goal here is to up your game when it comes to cold email ability. And the reason why it's so important is because Google and Microsoft, which pretty much own majority of the email traffic in B2B, they own that. So we need to know what are the rules of the game. But ultimately, it is a bit of a black box because it's not like Microsoft and Google are telling us, what is it that we need to do. So, but because we are sending, so in business I'm currently in, because we're sending millions and millions of emails every single day, we have so much data behind the scenes that we have analyzed. So essentially those insights and what you could do to improve your performance really comes from the large data sets. So let's have a look at what we've got for you today. But before we kind of go into that, just briefly about me, Frank Sondors, as I mentioned, so I've been in sales for over a decade. I run multiple businesses. I don't want to kind of go into them. We are in the marketplace in HighLevel in there, and there will be a snapshot as well available if you ever want to explore. But ultimately, all you have to think about is I'm a former head of sales. We used to run large sales teams, used to send a lot of cold emails in my life, and I decided to help businesses, agencies, solopreneurs, and Fortune 500 companies to improve the ability, because the legacy tech that exists out there in the space doesn't really solve that, because as I said, the rules of the game have changed by Google and Microsoft. So what does success look like in cold email today? So first, it's about the leads, right? So we definitely want to be sending always emails to the right leads. And this is, as I mentioned, that's not something that we're going to cover. You could literally talk about the whole hour masterclass. There's just literally on leads. Maybe we'll do that at some point. But and then the other thing that really is important in the world of cold email is the need to scale and the need to stay out of spam. So why do you need to scale? Why do you need to send so many emails? Why can we not have 100% reply rate? And that's the fact because there's about at any given moment 2 to 3% of your potential buyers that are in the market for what is it that you actually are selling. So because of that, you just don't know something. You just don't know who are these potential buyers that you're going after. So, and that's why you need to be scaling. You need to be sending sometimes 100 emails per day, sometimes 1,000 emails per day. Really depends on your TAM, right? So it forces you to go out, and because you have probably high pipeline targets, revenue targets, right? And because, as I said, email is the cheapest form of customer acquisition. When you're going to start scaling, you will start facing these spam issues, right? So this is where we're going to be trying to talk about this a bit more in depth, and please do leave your questions so we can answer them for you later on. Now, the final thing is, yeah, go on.
I know we're about to get into in depth on strategy around email, and please feel free to add color, context, or correct me in any way here. But every country, region, state has either the Can Spam Act or some sort of law or regulation or restriction with emailing. So what's going to be shared right now, and this is to the audience, you should most definitely take this information, abide by those regulations, do some further research. But more importantly, Frank, if you can just give some color on, again, not any legal advice or recommendation, but what have you experienced that has helped you stay within the coloring book lines of not getting in trouble by just emailing everyone and anyone without doing that research?
Yeah, so definitely there's Can Spam, there's GDPR, and there's a lot of other legislation in the world. There's also some countries, for example, like Denmark, where you cannot send cold emails within the country at all. It's illegal altogether. So yes, the legislation is different potentially for each of the geos out there. So if you're a global business, then you should definitely check out all these regulations. But the typical line of thought is if you're in B2B, and this is truly B2B, this is not B2C. This is truly B2B. Then when you have a particular product that you have built, a software or a service, and when you're reaching out to another business, and you typically have what's called a legitimate interest, which is why you're reaching out to that business, and you have that is legal, so you can do that in majority of the places in the world. However, you do need to give that user the ability to opt out from the communication. Super important. There has to be a clear mechanism. How do I opt out? Whether there's a link, which is in the header of the email. Sometimes you've seen that in the newsletter when you're sometimes getting that. Either there's a link in the body of the email, or there's at least a line of text that explains how do I opt out from this communication. This is not legal advice, but this is typically what customers do, and the business that's actually sending out these emails is liable naturally for every email that goes out. And from a campaign perspective, you definitely want to make sure that the recipient party knows who is it that's reaching out. So the baseline expectation is that in your signature, you have your first name, your last name, the business name, the address, the telephone number. So it's things like that that ultimately is something you should do, because if you're not going to do that, when I receive an email and it's going to say, it's going to say, hey, Frank, do you need this? JB. It's only going to say JB in the signature. I don't know for which company does JB actually work for. I don't know from which part of the world he's from, and so on and so forth, right? So definitely this ruins your credibility. So it's paramount that you also just have a nice signature, proper signature, essentially what I call first name, last name, what business you represent, and then definitely what can help you is if you have the address and sometimes the telephone number. That is really, really solid from a spam perspective.
And
But again, this is not legal advice, but this is just something that I've seen our customers doing, nonstop.
And thank you for sharing. And you mentioned offline you have about 10,000 or close to 10,000 or maybe 10,001 customers that you serve on your platform using your service. There's subscribers, there's insights, datas, the whole shebang. Is that accurate?
Yes, we have a lot of customers across all parts of the world, whether they're in Japan, Europe, US. Yes, and the legislation is very different. But from a standpoint of, from the standpoint of the, let's say, the software vendor, right, who's providing the service, our job is to make sure we give you the mechanism, right, to be compliant. That's our job. But it's your job as an agency owner, or ultimately really as an end user, is that you're reading the legislation, you understand what it means, and you're doing all the right things within the software to always stay compliant. If the prospect tells you, please do not ever email me again, please make sure you put them into what's called the do not contact list. Do not contact them ever again, because if you will do that, you may be in trouble. And the fines are massive, definitely on this topic. Don't want to scare anybody, but it has happened, and I've seen the cases, and there've been essentially customers that I have. They are compliant, but then they told me that their competitor just had a massive fine in the US because they were not compliant. They were doing it, things in a particular way, and there will be an angry person, who knows the law really well, and if you're not going to do it correctly, right, they do have the right to go and file, piece of paper to go after you. Because some of them really hate the unsolicited communication that you get, right? So always be nice with your prospects. Bottom line, give them the mechanism to opt out. Think about it. If you would get that email, right, and if it was not relevant for you because that product is not something that you need, please, 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 give the person the ability to opt out. I actually sometimes get cold emails myself, right? And I would opt out. I will click on the button, right? And I will not harm your deliverability. But if you will not give me the ability to opt out, I will block you. I will report you as spam. I potentially will blacklist you, right? This is what I will do to you. And you don't want to be blacklisted. You don't want to be reported for spam, because all these things that the recipient party could do to you, it will negatively impact your deliverability, which is why you need to be nice, which is why opt-out has to be a thing at all times.
Frank, we're going to have to do another masterclass on this particular part, right? Because I know our agency customers, they're bringing on new staff. I mean, we hear great success stories about agencies growing, being acquired, and there's this revolution of just HighLevel being part of the small part of the big picture of success. So thank you for just unleashing, just sharing from your perspective, your expertise. I know we have a wealth of more information, but I feel like we got the most important part of the law, the rules covered. So let's get back to having some fun here. Build that excitement back up. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, I'm afraid now. Please don't be afraid. We just want to keep you safe and aware. So I'm an agency
Yeah.
owner. I'm ready to take on this challenge of growing. I want to get my first 10,000 customers, maybe my first 100 customers. Walk me through the journey of where do I and what do I have to do to get it done?
Yeah. So again, just going to recap quickly on the pillars, right? Where you have to invest your time, your headspace, right? So again, pillar one, use the right software to send those emails, right? So there are softwares that are really specifically designed and built to send cold emails with high deliverability in mind. Just search on Google, you'll find them. Number two, make sure you have what's called a cold email infrastructure. We're going to talk that in a bit. That means, simple rule there, again, something for you to note, do not send cold emails from your primary business domain, because as I mentioned, every email, maybe I mentioned, but I'm going to definitely mention it right now. Every email that you send out from your primary business domain to another business, your class is what's called an unknown sender to that organization. That means every email is at risk when it's being delivered to that recipient. And the probability of getting a spam report from that other party or being blacklisted is relatively high. So you don't want these emails going out from your primary domain, because if you're gonna be too naughty and you're gonna get way too many of them, then most of your emails will start landing in spam across your whole customer base. Maybe you have investors, like anybody, partners, and all of that. You don't want that to happen. So we're going to talk about the necessity for you to have an infrastructure, which means you're setting up these what's called secondary domains, these parallel domains, it's called burner domains, the multiple names from them. And you're also going to set up these mailboxes as well. And you're going to have many. And the reason why you're doing that is you're just de-risking, you're diluting essentially across this sort of distributed infrastructure. So you're not putting your primary business domain at risk. You do that with your agency and customer, etc. You cannot essentially send emails anymore, unfortunately, just from one single domain. You need to have multiple. And the more you're sending, typically the bigger your market is, the total addressable market that you're going after, typically the more domains you'll be procuring. But a typical customer around the world typically has about 5 domains, and typically would have about 10 mailboxes. So I'll give you an example. Let's say we're Walmart, all right, and let's say Walmart only does B2B and is looking to get new suppliers. Walmart would set, domains like teamwalmart.com, trywalmart.com, getwalmart.com, and so on and so forth, right? So essentially, these are domains that are owned by Walmart. Walmart then would reach out to those suppliers using those domains rather than walmart.com. So that's just an example, right, of what you need to do. And the good news is you don't have to set up those manually in like a register like GoDaddy. There's a bunch of solutions out there. We have some as well, where you can just simply within less than 5 minutes set this up and you'll be done with it, right? So that's pillar 2. Pillar 3, and that's what I'm mentioning right now, is the copy. And we're going to dive deep into the copy right now. But simple rule of thumb, if you are sending templates as cold emails, so this cold email, this is not like newsletter, not inbound traffic, but really cold emails, meaning emails that you're sending as an unknown sender to another business. These are cold emails. So if you are sending those, and if you're just sending templates, I must tell you, we have some bad news. It's not going to work out in a lot of cases. The reason is Google became very, very smart with Microsoft. What, for example, Google does, Google uses Gemini to associate spam reports with the content today. So when Google sees that for this particular domain, we're getting a ton of spam reports, it looks at what was the content that was sent. And naturally, this content, this template, where you're just changing the first names, right? So the majority of the content is the same. You're sending that, maybe hundreds and thousands of emails go out, right? So Google is not dumb, So what that means is, we're going into this world where I'm calling what we call the death of templates, especially for outbound, for sure, for cold emailing. So you need to figure out how to make sure that if you are sending these templates, they're somehow different. So there's a concept that's known as spin tags. We're going to go into that. You're essentially randomizing the content, but you're saying the same thing. So for example, hey, hi, hello, where the system just picks one of the 3 words. That's one way to do this. Second way is to use AI. There's a bunch of AI tools on the market where you can literally craft a unique email to each and every individual. And by doing so, you get 2 benefits. Benefit 1, your deliverability will be far superior. That's benefit 1. Benefit 2, if the email is actually unique, what will happen is you're going to get more replies. Because if you think about it this way, if I'm sending the same email to 100 customers and I'm going to get a reply rate of X, let's say 1%, right? 1% reply rate. By the way, on this topic, I would love to hear, guys, what is your reply rate right now? We'd really love to see that. What is your reply rate now? So whatever the reply that you're putting it right now in the chat, think about it. If your reply rate could suddenly double in relative terms, so it could be like 2%. And that's exactly what the AI could do for you. If you're going to send a unique email to each of those 100 individuals, then you would typically see significantly higher reply rate. And that means 2x relative lift. So imagine what could that mean to your business if 2 times more customers would actually respond to you by you actually putting in the effort and actually sending a unique email to each and one of them. But also thinking for yourself, it's about your brand as an agency owner or not. It doesn't really matter. Everybody cares about their brand. When you send out that template, and when I look at these templates myself, and I get a lot of templates, like 100 at least per week, at least 100. And I look at them, and you can see that this email was sent probably to a lot of people out there. So I know this email was not sent for me. So people have an email fatigue. So unless this is like super painful for me, so the pain that you're solving for them, I'm not gonna reply back for sure. I'm gonna click on the beautiful spam button, but before that, I'll try to unsubscribe. So if you have this nice unsubscribe link, I will help with your deliverability, right? This is why it's important to give the mechanism to unsubscribe. But if you're not gonna give me that link, I will report you as spam, and there's also the block button. Essentially, I'm gonna send a signal to Google saying that you're being naughty, and your emails will start landing in spam. So bottom line, if you are sending templates, eventually what will happen is your performance will tank, and what will happen is a lot of your emails will start landing in spam. And you may have seen when in Gmail in particular, there's this label when you open up an email that says similar emails have been marked as spam. That means the content, the same content goes out, right? So it goes telling that this content means spam, which is the reason why it is in spam. So let's progress. So this kind of top level, right? So, by the way, we did cover copy, but as I said, the last thing we will not cover is the leads, because on the leads, we'll be talking literally for an hour to just, where did you get the right people to message? Because you can have the best infrastructure, the best sending software, and we have the best copy. But if you're sending that to the wrong people, nothing will happen. You'll get spam reports, you'll get blacklisted, everything will happen to you. So figuring out who to send an email to, it is difficult. And I know a lot of people just like to get some data from a database, but really that doesn't cut it these days, unfortunately, because everybody's getting the same leads from a database. So you're fighting for the attention in the inbox. So again, so we could do another session at some point. By the way, if somebody has any issues on the leads, do pop them in the chat. We're not going to cover them, but maybe I'll be able to answer some questions later on.
Yep.
Cool.
And I don't want to get you in the chat right now, Frank, but we do have responses of people with the reply rate. So after we get done, if you could take a look back into the chat, we have a few on YouTube and a few on Facebook. And I mean, you're part of our HighLevel community, so this is being streamed on all of our different socials. So I don't want to make you go on LinkedIn and the groups, but wherever you get a chance, I would say at the very least, the HighLevel Facebook business page, our LinkedIn, and our YouTube channel, they're coming in, which is cool. So thank you all for engaging. Reply rate, what's your reply rate? Where do we take it from there?
Yeah, so I mean, what should you expect generally? I think what a general good reply rate is somewhere between 1% to 3%, right? So if you're not even getting a 1% reply rate, like that's the lowest that you expect, then that definitely there's massive room for improvement. So 1% to 3% is good. You're really killing it if you're like at 5% reply rate, right? You're really killing it. Anything above 5%, you're flying really. Then you should have what we call solid unit economics in the world of cold email. Now the other thing, apart from getting the replies, most of the replies will be negative. Most of the replies will be like, no, I'm not interested. Please unsubscribe, whatever. They will tell you. They'll tell you also bad things as well. I'm not going to go into those. It also happens, right? Tell you, please, whatever. But what you should expect is like when you are already scaling, right, and you're getting a bunch of replies, we should be optimizing to have a positive reply rate, anywhere between 10 to 20%. So again, let's have another question to see, guys, what is your positive reply? So out of 10 replies, how many of them, guys, are positive? Do you get at least one positive reply rate out of 10? Or is it 2? Or is it 3? Please pop that in. I'm really curious, because really, if you have 2 out of 10 replies being positive, you're doing a good job. This is like best in class. 20% positive reply rate is amazing. If you're doing over 20%, you're probably selling something that's free, right? A lot of people say, Frank, my positive reply rate is 50%. And then you look at the copy and they're offering something for free. So of course you can, there are different ways how you can increase these positive reply rates. But generally speaking, you need these replies. Why do you need the replies? So you need to figure out how to just send an email to your prospect so you get some form of reply, even the negative reply. The reason is Google looks also at engagement rates between your domain and the domain of the recipient. Is there kind of something kind of going back and forth? And there's like, if there's nothing going back and forth, then it's pretty bad, right? Google really likes a healthy interaction between two domains. It has to happen. So if the prospect is not interested, then try and figure out how you can make them reply back. What could you say? Typically in the PS line, we're going to talk about the PS line in a bit. What could you say maybe in the PS line that will make them respond back? Let's say you could offer them like a checklist, for example, right? So let's say you're selling something, and that's your like the main offer. That's a pain that you're going in with. But like in the PS line, like, hey, I built this really cool checklist. Would you like me to send it over to you? Or like, hey, I could show it to you in a video, in a Loom video. Would you like me to send it over to you? And that's something you can have in the PS line. And again, that triggers a response. And these responses, these replies, is what feeds your deliverability, what improves your infrastructure health. So really, really kind of think about how do you get reply rates, even the negative ones, because they do help and improve your email infrastructure health. Now, rule of thumb, I talked about some domains, I talked about some mailboxes, but really a single email account. So, a lot of people get a lot of emails, but really a single email account can only send about 50 emails per mailbox per day. So if you have a sales rep in your agency or you're sending emails, again, I want to know in chat, how many emails right now are you sending from one mailbox? Cold emails, that is. Cold emails. If you're sending over 50, well, I'll tell you, you're in trouble. You're at risk, essentially. So 50 emails is really what was called organic or human behavior of a single mailbox. You should not be sending on average, more than 50. If you're consistently sending like 100, 200 emails from a mailbox, it's bad. It's really bad. So the level, really, roughly where you want to be at is 50. And then out of these 50 emails, we're going to go into this a bit, but only 30 of them are cold emails and 20 are what's called warm emails. So essentially, you're mimicking this real human behavior through a concept that's called a warm-up, where essentially you can be in this sort of what's called a warm-up pool with other friendlies and other essentially businesses, one software. So we do that, for example, and you kind of exchanging communication back and forth to really improve the health of the infrastructure. So the warm-up emails improve the infrastructure health, while cold emails degrade the infrastructure health, right? Which is why you need this balance between cold and warm. So really a maximum of 30 cold emails. And this is really the max. The most sophisticated agencies in the world, actually today, they only send about actually 10 to 15 emails. So they are really cutting down. And the reason is they're just trying to de-risk the burn rates of the infrastructure. So, but really 30 is the max. But at the end of the day, what I would say is like, if you have a really, really great engagement between what is it that your domains and what is it that you're sending, and you have a lot of responses going back. Let's say maybe you have 20% reply rate. If you have a super, super healthy reply rate, that means you can actually send more emails because the positive replies that you're getting, you're feeding the Google's algorithms and they're perceiving that these being healthy domains. And so more you can send sometimes more volume, rarely, but only have a super, super high engagement rates when you're sending those cold emails out. All right. So what is the scaling strategy for, let's say you're an agency or you have a customer, right? And they have a huge TAM. What is a huge TAM? I would typically say a huge TAM is like, 10,000 plus businesses. That's a huge TAM. That means there's a lot of accounts, there's a lot of contacts, right, that we could be reaching out. Right? Because typically, even though there's 10,000 businesses, what I always say, you need to be doing what's called multi-threading. You should be like probably reaching out like 2 or 3 individuals at that particular account, that particular business, essentially, right, to try to penetrate the account, right, try to acquire them, right? So that means, if let's say we're going to reach out to 3 individuals, either in parallel or sequentially, that means we need to send about 30,000 emails, So let's say somebody comes to us and says, Frank, I have this list of 10,000 businesses. What's next? Next is like, okay, what is the volume that we should be sending? We should be sending at least to 3 individuals in those businesses. That means 30,000 emails I need to send. But then also at the same time, per individual, we send typically 3 emails, what I recommend. So 1 initial email and 2 follow-up emails. So if you multiply that times 3, that means we're going to be sending out now 90,000 emails. That's a lot of emails that we need to send, And when you think about it, when I told you we should be only sending 30 cold emails per mailbox out, cold emails, that means, you need to have quite a big infrastructure, right? So we're going to talk about infrastructure, super important topic. And kind of just on that topic, kind of infrastructure, kind of scaling. So this is how you kind of think back in your mind. But I always say, that one of the biggest problems also in sales is the timing piece, right? Because not everybody is in the market for what is it that you're selling. So you should, if you're not getting a response from your prospect and the prospect hasn't unsubscribed from your list, you definitely want to be reaching out again after a quarter. So that means over the course of a year, you'll be reaching out at least 3 to 4 times to that particular individual, not account, individual. So let's go into the infrastructure kind of topic briefly. So scaling strategy for large TAMs. So infrastructure health is tracked on the domain level, really, not subdomain level. So let's think of it this way. So a lot of businesses like to set up what's called these subdomains. So let's say a subdomain could be like frank.gohighlevel.com, right? The frank is essentially the subdomain of HighLevel, right? That is a subdomain. And then we're going to have jb.gohighlevel.com, right? So we have these two subdomains. But really, the health of these two subdomains is actually tracked on the top level domain, which is gohighlevel.com. So if gohighlevel.com will be impacted, let's say it will be blacklisted, or it will burn, essentially what's called. If it burns, then it burns all the subs. So JB will be burned and I'll be burned, essentially, right? So using subdomains is really good idea to be using for what's called the inbound stuff. So let's say on inbound, we're using HighLevel. We definitely maybe want to create maybe a subdomain for transactional emails, another subdomain for, let's say, newsletter stuff. And that's how you de-risking these huge email flows. So that's definitely a solid strategy for inbound. But for outbound, it doesn't work. Because in outbound, if somebody reports you, if somebody marks you as spam, they mark that top level domain. So this is where you need to set up these, adjacent domains. Really, you need to buy these additional domains, right? So again, recap: do not send emails from your primary business domain. If you're doing that, you can do that at a very low volume. So that means not more than typically 50 to 100 emails in total from your own primary business domain. If you're going above that, and most businesses are typically going above that, you need to decouple the sending over to other domains. Now, where do you get those domains? So the typical 2 good places that I typically just go to GoDaddy. They're very big. They've been around for a while. And then you could also go to Cloudflare. Really, these are the typical 2 recommendations in the whole industry. Frank, where do I go get my domains? The secondary recommendations would be actually Porkbun, and then Namecheap. So literally, like these will be the 4 places. Now, you need to set up what's called the DNS. DNS is one of the really critical key components of the infrastructure. So let's say when you buy these domains, it's not that you could buy them, that's it, you're done. No, you need to set up the DNS, the DMARC, the DKIM, SPF record, and all that stuff. And there's a lot of information on the web on how to set it up correctly. And then if you need to check whether the DNS records has been set up correctly or not, it's called mxtoolbox.com, mxtoolbox.com. Just go in there, pop in that domain, and see if everything is green. If everything is green, you've done a good job, essentially. So DNS, essentially, if something is red, you will be landing in spam. Think of it this way. If something is even red in there, you'll be landing in spam. Cool. So what type of domains we should be buying? Typically, as I said, try Salesforce.ai, get Salesforce.ai, and so on and so forth. There's a bunch of different variations and permutations of the same. The recommendation is that when you buy these domains, you set up 2 or 5 inboxes per domain. You get these mailboxes from something like a Google Workspace, Microsoft 365. You also can get these what's called SMTP accounts. So we have a couple of services there, for example. So you go SMTP and because with these SMTP providers essentially, so that means anything else a part of Google and Microsoft. These SMTP providers, what they do is you can set up literally within 5 minutes because they do just differently to Google, Microsoft. Because actually Google and Microsoft, they don't want to be setting up accounts at scale, right? So, which is why they don't have these sort of scaling mechanisms. But there's definitely providers that can do this whole thing in 5 minutes. So, and then as I mentioned, 50 emails per inbox per day, 20 for warm up, and 30 for cold. So you can read up what does warm up mean, how does this work typically, etc. How do emails going back and forth? But essentially, it's like an engagement pod, essentially, right? Kind of goes back and forth. Some people do that on LinkedIn and some other platforms, right? Where you can see this sort of inflated sort of engagement on threads, and posts on LinkedIn. It's a bit like that, right? In the world of email, right? It's just that everything happens automatically, like nothing is manual really. You just literally click a button and then the warm-up starts. And then the same for cold emails, right? So cold emails typically get executed also automatically. Now, JP, any questions? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I've seen so what you've shared, I've experienced it and I've tried to piece it together. I've gone to different sites, I've gone to different tools. I'll always see like an option to pay to get it set up for me. I'll see from
Yeah.
time to time folks, sell their consultancy services to set it up for me. But I feel like, what I just saw now is kind of what I've personally pieced together, and maybe some of our audience members have been through that too, where they've pieced together through FAQs, help docs, or services like you've mentioned before. Um, the strategy always changes, formats always change. What's new to me was the SMTP. I remember, back in the day when they had, T1s and T3s and OC48s, and when web hosting just came out, and platforms like MIRC and all these different like internet relay chats were out there. Maybe I'm dating myself, but it was that domain based, IP based conversation. They would use relocation centers and data centers to like put servers on. It sounds like, email marketing at scale with the proper strategy, following the proper rules, can get really complex if you're a big company that has hundreds of thousands or millions of subscribers that want to get information they've opted in for. And what you've shared with me with the subdomains works great for inbound. Outbound, maybe using it for re-opt-in, reconfirmation, rechecking if a email is still active. And I've gotten these alerts where it's like, you haven't used this email in a while from one of the providers, we're going to close it. Like there's a huge shift in email. Is all of that correct to say, Frank? And if it's not, please correct me.
No, it's definitely correct to say you need a proper email strategy. But one strategy is for all the essentially email traffic that happens on inbound, like we talk about transactional email, so making sure invoices get delivered in the primary. The newsletter traffic is very huge, right? But even like I can tell you, some people will subscribe to a newsletter and they will still report your domain as spam. So like there are people like that. So this is why you also need to decouple, especially when you have huge volume. If you have like 10,000 plus subscribers, and you keep on sending them newsletters, maybe daily, on a daily basis, you are also at risk. You definitely want to get this sort of subdomain. Typically, it's like mail.gohighlevel.com, like as an example, right? So you would send from there on. Then there's also notification emails. There's typically, like, let's say you are an agency or like a software business, notifications.gohighlevel.com. That's another subdomain, right? So you definitely, like, whatever there's a huge email stream on inbound, you definitely want to set this up. But it's not something that folks do definitely on the outbound because, as I said, when somebody gets blacklisted or you report a spam, they report it on top of the domain. So setting up the sub just doesn't make sense.
And I
It will
appreciate
be a
you
cheaper
going over.
strategy.
Yeah, I appreciate
Yeah.
you going over reputation and kind of, for those of you that are experienced and you're looking to get some of this extra value or a nugget or two that maybe you did not know or you need a revalidation on, or you were not sure that this was even something that is possible. Thank you for just being patient with us as we educate the entire audience, right? Because there's people at all different levels here, that we just
Yes.
want to make sure they understand why we're saying what we're saying and how we're positioning it. So,
Yeah.
if you're okay with this, Frank, I just want to take an attendance. How many of you in the audience, wherever you're at, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, are experienced at outbound email marketing? You have a sophisticated strategy, process, system, either similar to what has been shared by Frank or something you've learned from somewhere else. Let us know by commenting a one in the chat below. A one is for if you have a sophisticated system that you've set up. And if you're super brand new to this concept, to the understanding, to this whole process, and it's like, this doesn't seem right, Frank's going to share a little bit, like he's just did before, with why companies and why agencies have to set these email systems up to help their customers get invoices and newsletters and their information out, as well as to, right, introduce themselves to the world. Type in new to email outbound, right? Let us know in the chat below. Frank,
Mm.
I'm prepared and ready, just mentally, to take on what you have next here. Are there any closing remarks that you want to make on this slide before I give the
Yeah,
mic
just
back
little
to you?
one. Like if you're really wondering what is the health of your current infrastructure, just search in Google right now placement test or spam test and just do one of these tests. And then essentially you'll be able to see across a bunch of mailboxes across Google and Microsoft, so the business ones, plus you can also do it for personal one, like are you landing in spam or not? Like just do that test, and if you see that you have something comes back as red, you have a problem. If something is green, all good. But if it is coming back as red, you need to take action. You need to do something about it, and this is why we're here, especially for the individuals where something is not working. We want to fix it, but also for the folks where everything is green, you don't want to get into the red zone, right? So you want to protect your infrastructure reputation. And so there's other things you need to do. Always think about these 4 pillars that I mentioned to you, right? So always think about it, back in your mind, where do I need to invest my time? The leads, the copy, the sending, which sending software to use, in the infrastructure, is it healthy? And again, the final remark here, when you do get these domains, when you do get these mailboxes, typical burn rate is anywhere between 4 to 6 months. So that means a domain will burn after 6 months. So you should be procuring again another batch of domains after 6 months. This is something that you do operationally, right? So if you bought the domains 6 months down the road, you can do that placement test. And in a lot of cases, it has burned, because ultimately, when you buy these domains, you're looking to burn them essentially, right? So they will burn. And we're going to talk about some of the strategies, especially around the copy front, how we can reduce the burn rate and make sure they last as long as we can, so we don't have to buy a bunch more domains, because naturally the operational cost increases when you buy so many domains. So the strategy here is, like, before we go into the next slide, is just, if you are in the email game, in the cold email space, right? Making sure you have another batch of domains maybe lying around and warming up. Just don't use them, right? So essentially, if the first batch burns, you always have other domains ready to rock and roll. The reason why I'm saying this is because to actually warm up the infrastructure, it takes a couple of weeks. So when you buy these domains, you need to warm up for a couple of weeks before you actually engage the prospects. And if time is money, you can't wait for 2 weeks, right? So make sure you have a secondary batch ready to rock and roll, replace, and then you use that. So that's just a little nugget there for you guys on the infrastructure topic. Cool. Let's move on. So after the setup is done, we talked about email warm up, a lot. And there's a lot of tools. Some are good, some are bad. Do your own research online. But we've covered that. I think it's very straightforward. We need to mimic that real human behavior across all the distributed infrastructure to bump up the engagement numbers. Very important, because naturally the cold emails, we don't have as much of engagement. So naturally with the warm-up emails, typically the replies, they're like 20, 30%, but they're all fake naturally. But then the cold email replies are much, much lower. So when you're kind of sort of blending warm and cold, then it's totally fine. Now the next thing, so this is one of the, so there are a few things which really kill your infrastructure. One, we talked about it a lot, spam reports, right? Blacklisting, all that stuff really kills. But the other thing which we didn't touch is email validation, making sure you're verifying, validating essentially the email addresses before actually you would send an email to those individuals. Because there's a very high turnover everywhere in the world. Doesn't matter which industry that is. People come and go. So if you're pulling a list from some sort of database, a lot of that data is not valid anymore. You need to validate at the point of sending out that email. And if you're going to have a bounce rate already over 1%, you're in trouble. And the reason why bounce rate matters a lot is because essentially Google and Microsoft associate the bounce rate with a lot of automation that exists. And typically, everybody that's automating, they have a high bounce rate essentially. And essentially your strategy should be to get the bounce rate to as close to 0% as possible. And one of the best ways to do that, it's not the only way, but one of the best ways to get the bounce rate down to 0% is just to verify at the point of you wanting to send an email out to that individual. And you need to do that every time when you're looking to send out an email, not once. Sometimes people do it once and then they never validate the list again. And then they have like a 5% bounce rate, or they keep on bouncing. Sometimes like 10% bounce rate. But anyway, make sure the bounce rate is like super low. And the other thing, which makes a huge difference to your deliverability and making sure the infrastructure doesn't burn, is spin tag, so that constant randomization, and or using AI to programmatically compute these email copies in any language. So that is possible. There's a bunch of tools on the market. If you're not using them, I highly recommend that you explore. There are ways how you can deliver really great messaging at any scale to your prospects. So let's have a look. What is spin tags, right? So let's dive into the topic of copy. Here is a random screenshot from the web. You'll be able to find the same screenshot as well if you just search for spin tags copy. So this is an example of a random software where we essentially opening up with curly braces spin. We're saying, hey, aloha, hi, and we're ending the spin, right? So the system will randomly pick one of these 3 words and will insert that into the copy. But naturally, it has exactly the same meaning. how much spin taxing do you need to do? So you need to do at least 50% of the initial email should be spin tax as a minimum thing. You cannot be essentially sending templates. So you should, the first email is what matters the most. Essentially, whether you land in the primary or not, really everything has to do with the first email. So that means you need to strip out HTML, you need to do a lot of spin taxing, remove links. Like the first email is very important. And then once you land in the primary, then you can do whatever you want with the follow-up emails, etc. You can have a lot of HTML in it, videos, anything you want to do in the follow-up emails. But the first email is where you literally remove everything, and you're spin taxing a lot. So Google and using the large language models, right, cannot catch you that fast, right? It is not to say that spin tax, will be helpful forever, but definitely it works and it doesn't cost anything, which is the most important thing, right? It doesn't cost a cent to be using this thing. So it's just that people don't do it. So in some softwares, including ours, for example, you have this beautiful button called auto spin tax. So auto spin tax the copy. But also the other thing that a lot of these softwares do, like ours, is like you can also check whether there's any spam words in there. So there's definitely things like free trigger spam a fair bit. So there's essentially these sensitive words that do trigger spam filter. So you also have to think about when you're writing this copy, you have to kind of train your brain a bit if you've never done that. What are the naughty words that you should never use, ever, ever? They're in the red zone, essentially. Spam filters, do look at these words. It triggers the spam alerts. And on a spam alert topic, this is crucial, especially when you're reaching out to enterprise-grade companies like Fortune 500, etc., because those guys, they have very, very sophisticated anti-spam softwares in place, like Barracuda, etc. There's a bunch of them, Mimecast, and so on and so forth. And they're really trying to catch out these emails. They're really trying to make sure that if it's an unsolicited, a cold email, an email that comes from an unknown sender, it's being scanned by a bot, everything, the link and everything. So this is why, no attachment, no HTML. First email is just plain email that you're sending out. This is the best. And spin tax is just so you're randomizing, so Google doesn't catch you, essentially. So that's it on the copy. We're gonna AI is very straightforward. I'm not gonna cover the AI part because AI is AI, right? It's essentially garbage in, garbage out. Essentially, if you actually got to give a good input into the AI for every single individual, things will pan out. And there's a bunch of really cool software out there that can do this programmatically. We're one of them. So let's go on to the golden nugget. Some things that you can just think about back of your mind, and something that really matters when it comes to deliverability, performance, and actually seeing pipeline results from cold email. First of all, a lot of people love to track stuff these days, like open rate tracking and a bunch of other, like some people said, like even these custom pixels into email. Guess what? It will hurt your deliverability. So Google is very smart. And essentially, you want to make sure you're not tracking anything, unfortunately, in the email anymore these days. Because actually, I definitely understand everybody would love to track, and I also want to track stuff. But if tracking kills your deliverability, and we're talking here specifically about open rate tracking, then you should switch it off. And in many softwares, you can switch off open rate tracking to improve your deliverability. You should really look at essentially the reply rates within your campaigns, which is really the ultimate KPI. Why is that the case? Because the problem is with everything that's happening on the front of Apple, or on essentially because every email service provider will essentially trigger the tracking pixel differently. The results are very, very different depending on whether you're, whether the recipient uses Apple Mail, whether they use, Google, whether they use Microsoft. So the open rates will be very different. So they're essentially they're flawed. It's like, you're looking at open rates it's like impression data in Facebook. What really matters is like, are people clicking through? Are people replying back? That's what really matters, right? So if this tracking has a negative impact, the most sophisticated people in the world never track open rates ever. They only look at reply rates. And if for some reason the reply rates tank at some point, right? But let's say the infrastructure is burned, etc., you will see the drop in the reply rates, a very sharp drop in reply rates, because you're essentially starting landing spam. This is when you start to investigate, right? But like, again, you could have done all that analysis based on the reply rates rather than the open rates. So again, recommendation number one, golden nugget, is don't track open rates, because you're probably seeing, guys, this sort of image by Google. So images in this message are hidden. This message might be suspicious of spam. So, and there's that button called report spam. So this message was triggered because this company called Bridge have sent me an email, and in that email, there was a tracking pixel. So Google has seen that, and I bet you've seen that, guys, as well. And a lot of more people essentially started to click on the report spam button, which is what's killing your deliverability. Right, next one is what's called inbox rotation. So in a lot of softwares, when you do use multiple domains mailboxes, there's no rotation that happens. It's very important that we're rotating the email accounts. So I'll give you an example. So let's say we have 3 leads and we have 3 mailboxes. So for lead 1, we're going to use mailbox 1. For lead 2, we're going to use mailbox 2. And for lead 3, we're going to use mailbox 3. So essentially, we have assigned a random mailbox to each and every lead. It's very important to do this sort of what's called inbox rotation, where there's some sort of randomization so that Google can't see patterns, essentially, right? We're trying to kill patterns so Google doesn't assume it's automation. So there's a thing called inbox rotation. It's very important. So when you're using one of these sending softwares out there, ask them, hey guys, are you rotating the mailboxes that I have in your software? And if the answer is no, that's not good. So inbox rotation, super important. Next called nugget is what's called ESP matching. ESP matching means email service provider. So that's Google Workspace, that's Microsoft 365, and then a bunch of SMTP accounts out there. So it's everything else essentially, right? ESP matching. Some people really discuss in this industry that ESP matching can significantly help to improve your deliverability. So for example, Salesforce would do that. So what does that mean? If, for example, your recipient uses Google Workspace accounts, we should be really sending from a Google Workspace account, that email, to improve the deliverability rather than from MS365. So a lot of people have seen great results. So that's something, for example, that we support also in the software. But there's also other software that support that. So but the ESP matching is definitely a thing on how you can improve your deliverability. So in the early days, essentially when you are building your infrastructure, even for your primary business domain, you should always think back of your head, okay, does my ideal customer that I'm servicing or the customers that I'm servicing, do they predominantly use Google or do they predominantly use Microsoft? So if they use Google, you should use Google. If they use Microsoft, you should use Microsoft to improve the deliverability, right? That's just for the primary domain. But then for the secondary domains, it's the same logic. So if majority of the prospect that you're trying to reach out to predominantly use Microsoft, please do use Microsoft, right? So that's really the logic. If it's a mix, then you should be really buying a mix of both. So let's say maybe 70%, if you realize that 70% of your prospects use, Google, then buy maybe, 7 mailboxes, and then the rest is, let's say, Microsoft maybe, right? So then buy 3 Microsoft mailboxes as an example, right? If you're buying 10 mailboxes as an example here. So, and then there's no data to suggest that SMTP accounts have a negative impact, right? But this is just, a data in the industry and something you could definitely use and kind of think about and easily implement. The next one, we talked about the spin tags part, but we also talked about that making sure we don't have any naughty words in there, right? And we always remember, probably all of us have gotten this email from the Nigerian prince, right? All of us probably got the $1 million, whatever that is, right? And guess what? A lot of these words get triggered. So there is a tool on our website, but there's also a bunch of other tools. It's called the spam checker. You literally check whether in your copy there's a spam word, right? So you literally copy paste that template or that spin tags rather template, right? That I told you about. Spin tags all of that, copy all of that into here or any other tool and just check whether there's any sensitive words and just get rid of them, right? Literally get rid of them because again, if you're gonna have these non-sensitive words in there, it improves your deliverability. Next one, maximum 3 emails in a sequence. So sequence is a campaign. It's a sequence. It has maybe a bunch of other names, but it's a sequence. It's a campaign that you're sending to your prospect. And I think a lot of us have been really naughty, as in, I think one question maybe I want to ask you really, like, how many, if you are in the world of cold email, how many emails are you sending to your one lead? Is it 3 emails? Is it 4 emails? Is it 5 emails? Is it 6 emails? Some of my customers that I've spoken to, they used to send 10 emails over a span of like 3 to 4 weeks, 10 emails to the prospect. Guess what happens when you get 10 emails from somebody? Essentially, with every email that you're sending out to your prospect, the likelihood that they're going to report your spam increases, and increases exponentially after the third email, which is what I'm saying here, guys, is like, really, if you're looking to engage with your prospect, only please send 3 emails max. The best cold emails in the world, what they do is they only actually send 2 emails. Really, imagine if only 2 emails counts for your lead. What do you do then? Well, you send them something on LinkedIn, maybe. You cold call them, etc. Right? There's definitely other channels, right, to improve the conversion rate. but don't send more than 2 or 3 emails to your prospect, or then try to figure out, the multi-channel strategy. And what you should do then, like, let's say if email is really the only option. So you send these 2 emails, we got no reply, and they didn't unsubscribe. As I mentioned to you, we will be back after a quarter, right? So we should be re-engaging, and this is what really helped. This is how you build a really healthy pipeline, because it was just the wrong timing. You reach out in Q1, well, they didn't respond. Well, what happens? I reach out in Q2, and sometimes they respond, and sometimes they respond in Q3 and Q4. As long as it's the ICP of your business, so it's the ideal customer profile that you're going after. Just keep on sending. Think of this like essentially as ads, really, right? Just like in Google and Facebook, we're seeing these ads. It's the same thing, as in we're just floating these impressions once a quarter, a couple, three emails, and then if they don't respond, we'll be back. So yeah.
Frank, on golden nugget number 5, if I'm sending between 2 to 3, maybe I'm pushing the envelope on email 4. If I push the envelope on adding email 4, is it based on your expertise, your experience, the data and insights you have of your customer base and how you advise other clients? Do I consider including a new opt-in? Do I add it somewhere in my bottom call to action of the email to maybe join another list that maybe is less sequences or less intervals of outreach? So, like, for example, if I have you on my newsletter, and this is just some context for some people that are maybe new. If I have you on my newsletter and I've emailed you the opt-in, hey, thanks for opting into our newsletter. If you're interested in content related to our workshops or sales and promotions, you can click on either of these and receive notifications on those details and share a little bit around that cadence of what they're opting into. What's your opinion on that?
It's a definitely good strategy, right? So how do you get the folks that are not opted in to opt in, right? Definitely a good strategy, right? So I always say, if you are sending an email, send that email with value in mind, right? So like what is a typical strategy? So I always say, I have a friend in Australia that always says, no pain, no gain, no demo train. So what that means is, when you are sending a cold email, in the first email, you could just talk about the pain. You could try and validate whether the prospect really has that pain that you're solving with your service, your software, whatever it is that you guys doing. And by the way, on that front, I would really actually love to know if you are, an agency, software, whatever it is that you're doing, just pop that in your chat, guys. Really curious. We may again then steer here in one direction or the other. But so the first email is like, okay, so do you have this pain? Let's say email deliverability could be the subject line, lowercase. I typically is what I recommend, and I can ask a simple 50-character sort of email that got sent to a particular prospect, just inquiring whether they have a deliverability problem right now. That's all. I don't have to talk about the product and what I do and blah blah blah, all this stuff. And then the second email, right? If they haven't responded, it's like, hey, I haven't got a response from you, but this is what we do, right? And imagine that's really the second email. That's really the final email. And then, yes, so if they don't respond, maybe in that PS line, right? Specifically the PS section at the bottom, like if this is not relevant, maybe this is relevant. Yeah. And yes, you can then push them into this opt-in list, right? And you can nurture them. Yes. Super powerful, right? Definitely figure out these mechanisms, these automations, but what is it that you could do? But yeah, it's super valuable to get them into one of these lists, because then it's much easier, right? Because you're drip feeding them like with a lot of content, valuable content, right? Maybe with a masterclass, whatever it is that you're doing, right? And then they will ultimately convert when the time is right. Right? So you don't have to send them another cold email, and you can move on to the prospects that are not yet into your opted-in list. So yeah. Good question, by the way, JB.
Thank you.
So I talked about this a bit, but like I said, like I just mentioned, like if you do send this, email, and yes, send it lowercase. Why is that the case? Because let's say you get an email on your phone, right, or even on desktop, on your Mac, you're like, this is how all these emails look like uppercase, William from Global Theater, to be or not to be, doesn't matter what it says, right? And you can see that it's probably automated, right? So how can we interrupt this pattern? How can we do that? Well, what I recommend is like, hey, 2 or 3 words in a subject line, lowercase. It looks weird, right? It looks odd, right? And it is the pattern interrupt. A lot of people are like, Frank, this doesn't look right. Exactly, that's the point. You have to interrupt the pattern. And every email will read, and every person will get that preview and will say, hey, Frank, hi, Frank, howdy, Frank, whatever, it's always going to be the same. So try and also interrupt the pattern there. How can the preview text could be really, really, really different? Don't maybe start with the first name. Maybe start with something like, saw that you have XYZ, or saw that on LinkedIn you did this, Frank, right? But essentially you're starting the whole email differently. It looks weird. So when something looks weird, unusual, that's the pattern interrupt. That increases the reply rate, right? Because you're fighting for the attention of the user in the mailbox, right? And as I mentioned to you, like we're getting something, like sometimes, folks are pulling these lists from databases, and folks are sending a bunch of these emails, and then we're fighting for the attention of that user. So, and imagine the prospect has like 100 emails. Why would they open your email, right? Why would they do that? And like I mentioned, if you will mention the pain in the subject line, the pain that you're solving for your customers, and if they have that pain, they're very likely to open it. That's the logic that I have back in my mind, right? Which is why it's typically heavily focused on the pain within the first email body and also the subject line. So super important. So by the way, guys, if you are sending cold emails, I would also love to know what is really the typical subject line that you love to use if you do send a cold email. I bet a lot of you are going to say, quick question. Quick question is very typical, in this space. Quick question, Frank. Quick question, quick question, JB. What are you doing on a Friday night, So yeah, think about how you can do things differently. So while there's zag, we zig. You just have to be in a different swimming lane. Try to be different. Try to stand out, because just like in advertising, people have a fatigue to ads. Also in the main mailbox, people have fatigue to emails. You need to stand out from the crowd. Cool. CTA, call to action, soft or hard. JB, what do you think? Should folks use a soft CTA, like an open-ended question, or like a hard CTA? Let's grab time on Tuesday at 2 p.m.
I think
What
it
do you think works
depends.
best?
I think it depends on the offer and the relationship. How many times they've opened it, right? What's the micro moment you want them to do next?
Yes, I agree with you. Yes. I guess, the colder the prospect is, the colder they are, right? So we're reaching out for the first time out of the blue. I would typically say, yes, soft CTA. And if we've been warming up, we've been nurturing, try do a harder CTA. Now, when you are doing cold email campaigns, naturally we can do CTAs twice, right? In the first email, say in the second email. So I would say, okay, in the first email, let's do like an open-ended question, so like a soft CTA. And I would say something like, is this a priority? Is this on your roadmap? Question mark, right? That's it. That's all it is. Short, snappy. Is this important? Is this of interest? Is it worth exploring? Short and snappy. And then in the second email, right? So you had your attempt in the email one with the soft CTA, it didn't work out. We didn't reply. How about we try? So some people don't want to talk on email. They love to have a chat on the call. So you're literally gonna say, hey, if it's too long to respond, how about we grab some time next week at 2 p.m.? Does that work for you? If not, please just give me your calendar link. By the way, this is a really cool tip. Do not ever send your calendar link. Always ask for the prospect's calendar link, because there's this sort of power dynamic, this psychology. The customer or the prospect is the king. Ask for their time. And if you're in your industry that you're in, it's very common to be using these links, right? To book time, then ask from your prospect for their link, right? If it's not typical, then definitely, yes, do send your link. But that's just another tip how you can increase your reply rates, your conversion rates to demo booked or to meeting booked. All right, subsidy examples. Here's some longer ones. There's definitely a way also to make it longer, especially when you're dropping numbers. What if I could increase your revenue by by X? What if I could generate you 1 million impressions within 30 days? Within that's really, it works also really well. So if somebody could tell me, Frank, I will deliver to you 100 customers within 90 days, I'm listening. Like imagine that sort of CTA. Like, so if somebody would write that CTA to me, I would be like, oh wow, 100 customers within 19 days. That would be huge impact in my business. Like that's how you should think about the CTAs. These are strong CTAs. They're much longer, but then you definitely need to drop numbers. So by how much you're looking to improve something and within what time frame. Golden nugget number 8, very, very much underutilized. We talked about it a bit. Drop that PES. It just gives you another opportunity to pitch something else. So essentially, the main thing is in the body, right? But then in the PS section, you could pitch something else, right? Like a checklist, or get them into the an opt-in list, stuff like that. So always think about using the PS section, capitalize on that, because people definitely look at that PS. Everybody, like if you think about it back in your mind, you also probably look at the PS section, but make sure it's something totally different and potentially something of value. Always think about value, providing free value, and kind of pushing them, into one of these lists or checklists. Anything else works really well. Or you could say, PS, hey, I could send you a free video. I could do a free audit for you, whatever, do capitalize on the PS. You'll be surprised by how much you could improve the reply rate, and it's definitely worth doing an A/B test on something like this. Okay, so we talked that a bit. No links, images in the first email, but you can have as many images and as many links as you want in the secondary email, right? So because it's a follow-up email, because once you land in the primary, typically you don't go to spam unless the user moves to spam. So this is why you can spice things up and send a GIF. Videos work really well. There's a bunch of cool tools on the market that literally can send highly personalized videos. And again, don't send these videos in the first email. Always send in the second email. And yes, GIFs and videos work. They massively increase conversion rate. Here's an example of me sending to this guy named Cedric. Cedric is a friend of mine. And you can compute these, unique memes, GIFs to your prospect, and they're unique to them. So I used his website, I used his name, and this is something that you can do programmatically. So think about essentially other forms of communication, not just text. Don't just blast text, but also try to think about, okay, could I send a video? Could I send an image? Because these other forms of communication increase significantly performance, which then increase your deliverability, your pipeline results, and all that stuff. So highly advised to do that in the second or the third email. And when you write the emails, the final goal, don't be this guy. Don't write it, very long emails. There's only one market where the data proves that longer emails actually lead to better results, and that's Germany. The Germans, for some reason, love very long emails, but every other part of the world, the Brits, the Americans, the Canadians, Mexicans, everybody, they love short, snappy emails to the point. You know why? Because they get a lot of emails, and typically it takes a person 6 to 7 seconds to scan through the email, right? And if it's relevant, they're reading through it again and then replying back to you, right? But imagine if the prospect only spends a few seconds on your email, make it short, snappy, and get to the point, right? Why the heck are you reaching out to them, right? Here's some data as well why it needs to be short and snappy, because majority of the emails in the world are read on the mobile device. I know it sounds weird, but that is true. So if majority of emails are being read on the mobile device, then it has to be short and snappy so it fits into the screen, right? So you're not scrolling, because even if the user is scrolling, it already feels like it's a long email, right? And you don't want to be reading this. So short and snappy. Here's a guy on the right-hand side who's really wants to work at the Forge. That he wants to, come and work for us. And he sent me a cold email. I open it up. Oh wow, it fits really in in my whole screen. I don't have to scroll. This is a great email. This is a perfect email. I know it looks a bit lengthy, but it fits in the screen, and that's an example. So what I want to say is, when you're sending out emails from any software out there, so be that a newsletter or not, have a look. How does it look like on a mobile device? So if most folks are checking out the email, because they can also report your spam on mobile as well, right? So do you enjoy that experience? Does it look as good as on desktop, right? So a lot of people don't optimize the emails for mobile. Something I highly recommend. And that's it. That's all I have for you guys. So, guys, you may have a bunch of questions on how we can actually improve the deliverability for you, right? And how does it actually how does your high-level instance, how does it actually work with something like Salesforce? So we can literally go into a high-level account, go into the marketplace, and let's have a look at actually how that all works. So let me just share my screen. I'm already in the marketplace section. So you're in your sub account. So I'm having Salesforce in here. We are companies based in this beautiful place called Talent. You go to the app marketplace, and then we're just typing in Salesforce, and bam, we're seeing the Salesforce. What does actually happen? You're able to essentially push out the leads that you've got in HighLevel that you want to be processed with high deliverability in mind, right? So I mentioned this one crucial pillar in deliverability. And that pillar is the choosing the right software to send these emails, where you're increasing the probability of landing the primary. So Salesforce is one of them, right? So all you do is you select Salesforce, you hook it up, you push the leads, you do some mapping. It should take you less than a minute. And then naturally we're going to attach also a snapshot for you to use if you want to use a snapshot. And that's it. You hook it up. then you sort out your infrastructure, warm up the emails for a couple of weeks, and then we're good to go to send the emails, all those out, and get a bunch of replies back. So that's it. That's all I have for you, JB, this time.
I appreciate it, Frank. And just to emphasize here, the snapshot that's included, you'll be required to have a high-level account or get started with a 14-day trial. There's a link below to get the 14-day trial set up. And then once you log into your account, you'll open up a new tab in that same browser. You'll copy and paste the snapshot link, and it'll create an invite for you to import the snapshot. Like Frank has mentioned, the snapshot is designed to complement the Marketplace app. It's set up to make it easier. So essentially, the Marketplace app is to bring you into the Salesforce platform using HighLevel without you exporting or copying and pasting or trying to figure things out. Is that fair to say, Frank?
Exactly as you said.
Awesome. So, Frank, so we've set some great expectations. You've been very generous with the information, the strategy. It almost felt like we weren't even recording or live or together here. I mean, you really had me listening, and I feel like the slides that you shared were just really just to keep my eyes on the screen. But there was so much information, and I appreciate you going in depth. And I think there's a lot to say about that since you're a high-level user. You've built your platform as an add-on for high-level users to experience it. So we appreciate that. We know that folks are going to comment below, but we also know that folks are going to reach out to you, right, for more information. Yeah. What is your preferred way that you would accept messages? Is it through an email? Is it through LinkedIn? Is it through Messenger? I just want to make sure that folks get either to your team or to you, however you prefer, with questions.
Yeah, I mean, the typical places you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm also semi-active on X, but I always respond everywhere, right? And I think if you are in the business, in our business, or if you're an agency, you should be able to respond across the typical platform. But yeah, typically LinkedIn, X, and then you can definitely speak to us or in my team on our site. If you go to our site, you can speak to people literally live. It's just the same experience you get with HighLevel, that amazing experience when it comes to onboarding and everything. We kind of provide that similar experience, that best-in-class support plus sales assistance, essentially, with getting you onboarded, setting up the reseller program, and essentially being that a sidekick essentially to HighLevel, right? So this is really why we're building this, right? So to have that tremendous additional value just on a topic of kind of cold email, making sure your emails don't land in spam, etc. So yeah, I'm very open. Any questions? If I didn't answer something in the chat, my apologies. Just send me, if it's urgent and it's burning, just do reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I do typically answer to every single question.
Hey, look, y'all, thank you so much for joining us. Let's give our special guest, our high-level user, Frank, a warm high-level thank you. Throw in the chat some emojis. Let us know what you found as your aha moment. What are you going to run with right away? Share your feedback. We deeply would be interested in knowing it. Frank, thank you, man. It was a pleasure. The planning, the back and forth. I feel like it was well worth it. I hope you feel the same. And we'll see you at some of our events. You're going to be coming over to one of our premier events in the next couple of months. So I'm excited to meet you in person and give you a little fist pound and have fun.
Thanks, man. Thanks. Appreciate it. And yeah, see you offline, guys. Thank you so much.
Take care, everybody.